Ava Bennett was, to all appearances, just another Purdue student on Flight 415, her head buried deep in textbooks about advanced aeronautics. When the pilot suddenly collapsed just as a line of violent thunderstorms materialized on the radar, the cabin crew broadcast a desperate, heart-stopping announcement. "We've lost our captain and are facing an emergency. If anyone on this aircraft has piloting experience, we need you at the cockpit immediately." No one could have guessed that the unassuming young woman in seat 14B was about to become the fulcrum upon which the fate of all 182 souls aboard would turn. The sprawling, cathedral-like halls of Chicago O'Hare International were a chaotic symphony of human movement, the morning light glinting off the polished floors. It was the peak of the spring travel rush, a torrent of families seeking sunshine and university students, like Ava, fleeing the lingering Midwestern chill. Flight 415, bound for San Diego, was packed to capacity, a testament to the universal desire for a coastal escape. Standing near the boarding area for Gate C-18, Ava Bennett, a 21-year-old aerospace engineering junior, blended seamlessly into the crowd. Her attire, worn-in jeans, scuffed sneakers, and a navy blue Purdue University sweatshirt, was the unofficial uniform of a student on a budget. Her backpack seemed ready to burst with the weight of her academic life, while her laptop case held the requisite chargers, notebooks, and a collection of energy drinks for late-night study sessions. A closer look at Ava's sweatshirt, however, revealed a more specific story. Beneath the bold Purdue lettering, smaller embroidered text read, "School of Aviation and Transportation Technology." It was a detail most people overlooked, and the few who did notice probably dismissed it as a niche theoretical program. Ava, true to the discipline instilled by her flight instructors, had arrived at the airport a full 3 hours early. Punctuality and exhaustive preparation were not just habits, they were principles of survival in the air. She used the surplus time productively, poring over the dense schematics and emergency protocols in her Boeing 737NG systems manual. While her peers were likely scrolling through social media or catching up on shows, Ava was engrossed in the intricacies of hydraulic accumulators and inertial reference systems. As the boarding call for Flight 415 echoed through the terminal, Ava found herself queued behind a man in a tailored suit, Mr. Harrison Vance, who was loudly closing a venture capital deal on his phone. Noticing Ava struggling to maneuver her, heavy carry-on, he ended his call with a flourish and offered a patronizingly helpful hand. "Here, allow me," he said, flashing a smile reserved for those he considered children. "What are you carrying in there? A set of encyclopedias?" "Just my textbooks," Ava replied, shuffling down the jet bridge. "Textbooks? For a spring break trip? Young lady, you should be packing novels and sunscreen, not homework," Vance chuckled condescendingly. "What's the major that requires such dedication?" "Aerospace engineering and professional flight," Ava stated as she located her seat, 14B. Mr. Vance's eyebrows shot up as he hoisted her bag into the overhead bin with an exaggerated grunt. "Classroom flying, eh? Sounds impressive. Of course, it's a world away from handling one of these multi-million-dollar machines. I fly over 300,000 miles a year for my work. I've seen how much it takes. Years and years of real-world grit after you get the degree to even think about touching the controls of a commercial jet." Ava offered a polite, non-committal nod, choosing not to mention her commercial pilot certificate or the nearly 400 hours of actual flight time she had logged in complex aircraft. Experience had taught her that successful middle-aged men often viewed a college student's achievements as little more than academic exercises, divorced from the real world they so confidently inhabited. The woman settling into the window seat was Dr. Evelyn Reed, a tenured literature professor from the University of Chicago, returning from an academic symposium. She possessed a genuine, if somewhat condescending, interest in young people. "Aerospace engineering, how fascinating," Dr. Reed remarked, with a warm smile as she arranged her belongings. Are you hoping to become a flight attendant? It's a wonderful career for a young woman. You get to see the world, meet so many interesting people. Actually, my goal is to be a captain for a major airline, Ava corrected gently, retrieving her thick manual on aircraft operations. Dr. Reed's smile tightened slightly, transforming into one of benevolent pity for a young person with such grand, unrealistic aspirations. Well, that is certainly ambitious, dear. I imagine the training required to fly these enormous jets is incredibly rigorous and takes a very long time. Even after graduation, these Boeing airliners are such complex beasts, a far cry from those little propeller planes they must let you practice on. The fundamental principles of flight are universal, Ava stated quietly, trying not to sound defensive. The systems are more redundant and complex, but the core concepts of aerodynamics, navigation, and emergency management translate directly. Dr. Reed patted Ava's arm with a maternal air. Of course, dear. I'm certain your program is excellent. It's just that there's no substitute for lived experience, is there? But you have your whole life ahead of you to climb that ladder. Ava had navigated this exact conversation countless times. Adults saw her youth and immediately placed her in a box labeled inexperienced, their assumptions forming a barrier she constantly had to surmount. They couldn't know that Purdue's aviation program was a direct feeder for major airlines, renowned for its academic rigor and practical training. They were unaware that she had already passed the rigorous airline transport pilot written exam, or that she regularly flew challenging simulated routes that mimicked real-world airline operations. Crucially, they had no idea that Ava had spent hundreds of hours in a state-of-the-art Boeing 737NG full-motion flight simulator, mastering every system and rehearsing catastrophic failure scenarios that most seasoned pilots might never encounter. As the last passengers found their seats, Ava observed the flight attendant's pre-flight routine with a professional eye. She recognized the methodical safety checks and could mentally tick off the systems being verified. Her trained perception caught details others missed. The senior flight attendant confirming the cabin pressure settings with the cockpit, the crew verifying the locations of emergency medical kits, the precise and practiced rhythm of their preparations. Mr. Vance, having settled in, resumed his unsolicited commentary. You know, Ava, I've been on thousands of flights. The skill these pilots have is just incredible. It's a level of expertise you can only get from decades in the cockpit. It's not like driving a car or even flying one of those little private planes for fun. Actually, Mr. Vance, the training pipeline is very structured, Ava replied, maintaining a respectful tone. Student pilots master basic principles in single-engine aircraft and then progressively transition to more complex, multi-engine and jet aircraft as their knowledge and skills develop. The foundational skills are entirely transferable. Harrison Vance nodded with indulgent amusement. I'm sure that's how it works on paper, but when you're solely responsible for nearly 200 people and a $50 million asset hurtling through the air at 500 miles an hour, well, that's a different stratosphere of pressure. No offense, but a simulator can't teach you that. Ava was about to argue the point when the captain's calm voice filled the cabin. Good morning, folks. This is Captain Frank Miller. On behalf of your flight crew, welcome aboard Flight 415 with nonstop service to San Diego. We're looking at a smooth ride for most of the way, with an on-time arrival of 11:55 a.m. Pacific Time. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for departure. As the 737 pushed back from the gate, Ava opened her manual to the chapter on emergency descent procedures, a habit she'd formed to keep her knowledge sharp. Vance glanced over and chuckled. Still at it? You Gen Z kids are all workaholics. Relax, enjoy the miracle of flight. Let the pros up front handle the details. I find it relaxing, Ava said honestly. Understanding the systems helps me appreciate the complexity and the incredible safety measures involved. Dr. Reed leaned in. That's a wonderful work ethic, Emma, but I do hope you take some time for yourself in San Diego. All work and no play makes for a dull life. especially when you're young. Ava smiled and returned to her reading. The page displayed a detailed diagram of the 737's electrical system, showing the engine-driven generators, the auxiliary power unit, and the backup battery systems. She knew this aircraft model had multiple redundant power sources and could identify the specific bus tie breakers and switches that controlled power distribution. She understood the procedures for handling a dual generator failure. To her seatmates, she was a diligent student. They had no way of knowing she possessed a deeper technical understanding of the aircraft they were in than almost anyone outside of the cockpit. The takeoff from O'Hare was flawless. Ava felt the familiar, powerful surge as the CFM56 engines spooled to takeoff thrust, followed by the gentle, upward pivot as the aircraft rotated into the sky. Her senses were attuned to the subtle cues of a healthy flight, the specific harmonic hum of the environmental control system, the reassuring thud of the landing gear retracting into the fuselage, the almost imperceptible vibrations that signaled all systems were operating in harmony. As they ascended past 10,000 feet, and the double chime indicated it was safe to move about the cabin, Ava ordered a black coffee and continued her review. Her training emphasized constant situational awareness, a mindset she maintained even as a passenger. "You really are committed, aren't you?" Dr. Reed remarked. "But you must put the book down for a moment. We're flying over the Great Plains. The patterns of the farms from this altitude are like a patchwork quilt." "I am enjoying it," Ava assured her. "Aviation has taught me to process multiple streams of information at once. I can appreciate the view while reinforcing my knowledge." Harrison Vance laughed outright. "Flying? You mean in those little two-seaters? That's adorable. But it's not even in the same league as what these guys up front are doing. The judgment and instinct required to manage an aircraft of this size through unpredictable conditions. That takes a lifetime to build." Ava was tempted to detail her 150 hours of instrument flight time, much of it in challenging weather, but she knew it would be dismissed. To them, student meant novice. Instead, she simply nodded and turned back to her manual. Up front, Captain Frank Miller and First Officer Chloe Davis were managing a routine flight, the aircraft cruising smoothly at 36,000 feet. Miller, a 30-year veteran with a logbook full of transoceanic crossings, felt a strange, unwelcome queasiness. The airport hotel breakfast, sausage and eggs, had seemed fine, but now it was staging a rebellion in his stomach. Chloe Davis, with around 3,500 flight hours and just over a year on the 737, was a product of a top-tier university aviation program, much like Ava's. Her training was impeccable, but she was still keenly aware of the experience gap between herself and the IPA captain. As they crossed into Nebraska, Captain Miller's discomfort intensified into sharp cramping pain. A cold sweat beaded on his forehead. "Chloe, I'm not feeling right at all," he said, his voice strained. "I think I've got a bad case of food." "Poisoning. Do you need me to call for a medical kit?" she asked, her concern mounting as she saw the captain's face turn ashen. "Yeah, might be a good idea," Miller grunted, but as he spoke, a wave of vertigo washed over him. His vision swam, and his hands began to tremble on the yoke. Leo Ortega, the senior flight attendant, arrived moments later with anti-nausea medication, but it was too late. Miller was suddenly and violently ill. I can't fly," he gasped between waves of sickness. "You have the aircraft. I'm incapacitated." The words hit Chloe like a physical blow. She had practiced this exact scenario countless times in the simulator, but the stark reality of being the sole pilot responsible for 182 lives was a weight she could feel pressing down on her. "Denver Center, this is Flight 415. We have a medical emergency." Chloe's voice was steady, betraying none of the adrenaline surging through her. "Captain is incapacitated. First officer has assumed command." "Flight 415, Denver Center, roger your emergency. State nature of the assistance required." "Captain is suffering from apparent severe food poisoning. Unable to perform duties, Chloe reported, requesting priority handling to our destination, San Diego, and have paramedics standing by. Flight 415, you are cleared direct to San Diego. Maintain flight level 360. Be advised, we're showing a significant line of convective activity developing over the Rocky Mountains, directly on your flight path. Do you require a different route? Chloe's stomach clenched. The weather radar confirmed ATC's report. Massive, angry red line of thunderstorms was blooming over the mountains, promising severe turbulence, hail, and lightning. Navigating such weather required two experienced pilots working in perfect sync. The thought of doing it alone was terrifying. Captain Miller was now slumped against the side window, barely conscious. "Is there anything I can do?" Leo asked, his calm facade belying the deep concern in his eyes. "I need a second pilot," Chloe said, her voice tight. "Someone with jet experience who can help me with checklists, communications, and navigating this storm." Leo's face fell. He quickly checked the flight manifest. "No deadheading crew on this flight. I can make an announcement. Ask if there are any licensed pilots on board." It was a desperate last-ditch option, one that would undoubtedly cause panic, but it was their only one. "Do it," Chloe said. "I'll take any help I can get." Back in the main cabin, the illusion of a routine flight was shattered when Leo's voice, strained but firm, came over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your senior flight attendant. I need your attention for an urgent announcement. We are dealing with a medical emergency involving our captain, who is unable to perform his duties. Your first officer is in full command of the aircraft. However, we are approaching an area of significant weather, and she has requested assistance from any qualified aviation professionals on board. If you are a licensed airline or commercial pilot, a flight instructor, or an aircraft mechanic, please identify yourself by pressing your call button now." A wave of shock and fear washed over the cabin. Nervous whispers turned into anxious chatter. People scanned the faces of their fellow passengers, searching for a sign of a hidden hero. Ava's heart began to pound against her ribs. "Captain down. First officer alone. Severe weather ahead." This was the nightmare scenario they drilled relentlessly in the simulator. She waited, expecting a hand to go up, a call button to light up somewhere else in the cabin. On a full flight to a major city, surely there was a retired pilot, an Air Force officer, someone. But the seconds stretched into an agonizing minute of complete silence. The realization dawned on her with a terrifying weight. She might be it. Harrison Vance shook his head, his face pale. "This is a disaster. What kind of airline runs with no backup? A lone co-pilot can't possibly navigate a storm in a jet this size. We are in serious, serious trouble." Dr. Reed, ever the optimist, clutched her armrest. "Perhaps there's a pilot who's asleep and didn't hear the announcement. I'm sure someone will step forward." Ava's hand hovered over the call button. The doubt was paralyzing. A student? They would laugh her out of the cockpit. Her experience was in simulators and smaller planes. What if she made things worse? But then she pictured the first officer, Chloe, alone at the controls, staring at a wall of red on her weather radar. Even a second pair of trained eyes, someone to manage radios, run checklists, and offer another perspective, could be the difference between a close call and a catastrophe. She knew the 737NG systems better than most general aviation pilots ever would. Her training was recent, her knowledge of emergency procedures fresh. Taking a deep, ragged breath, Ava pressed the button. Leo Ortega was at her side in an instant, his expression a mixture of hope and profound skepticism at her age. "You're a pilot?" he asked in a low voice. "I'm a student pilot, but I hold a commercial certificate," Ava clarified, her voice shaking slightly but clear. "I'm in the professional flight program at Purdue. I have just under 400 hours, and my training has focused extensively on Boeing 737NG systems and procedures in a Level D full-motion simulator." Leo's face was a canvas of conflict. A student was not the seasoned captain he'd prayed for, but she was the only one who had answered the call. "Have you ever actually flown a jet this size?" he pressed. "Not the real aircraft, no. But I've logged over 250 hours in the 737 simulator," Ava said. "I know the cockpit layout, the flight management system, the emergency protocols. I may not have the airline time, but I know this plane." Vance and Dr. Reed stared, aghast. "Hold. On a second," Vance interjected, his voice sharp with alarm. "You're seriously considering letting a college kid into the cockpit? She's been reading a textbook. This isn't some academic exercise." "Actually, Mr. Vance," Ava said, turning to face him, her voice finding its steel, "I've been studying the specific failure modes of this aircraft's primary systems. I can tell you the exact location of the hydraulic system fire shutoff handle and the proper procedure for an emergency electrical configuration." "Can you?" Dr. Reed looked deeply troubled. "Ava, dear, this is a life-and-death situation. Are you sure you're prepared for this? Shouldn't we wait for someone with more real-world experience?" "No one else is coming forward," Ava countered. "And the longer we wait, the closer we get to that storm. If I can help her, even just by managing the radios and checklists so she can focus on flying, isn't that better than leaving her to do everything alone?" Leo made a snap decision. "Stay here. I'll consult the first officer. If she wants you, you're in. But if at any point she feels you're not helping, you come straight back to this seat. Understood?" "Understood," Ava said, already unbuckling. As she stood to follow Leo, a ripple of whispers followed her up the aisle. Some passengers looked at her with a newfound respect, others with raw fear. "Good luck," a man whispered from across the aisle. "Give 'em hell." When Leo opened the cockpit door, the scene was exactly as she had pictured in her worst simulator sessions. Captain Miller was incapacitated, and First Officer Chloe Davis was flying the aircraft with a white-knuckled grip, her face a mask of intense concentration and stress. "This is Ava Bennett," Leo said, "Purdue aviation student, commercial certificate, extensive 737 simulator time." Chloe looked from Ava to the turbulent skies ahead, her expression a mix of desperation and disbelief. "Honestly, I was hoping for a gray-haired captain with 20,000 hours," she said, her voice raw. "But you're what I've got, and I need help. Can you actually run checklists and work the radios?" "Yes, I can," Ava said, slipping into the observer's seat and immediately starting to absorb the information from the instrument panels. "I know these systems. I know the procedures. What's our status?" Chloe gave her a rapid-fire briefing. Their position, the captain's condition, the approaching storm. Ava's eyes were fixed on the navigation and weather displays, her mind processing the data at incredible speed. "The storm's core is moving southeast," Ava said, pointing to the screen. "If we request a 20-degree deviation to the north and slow our cruise speed, we can fly behind the main cell instead of through it. It'll add 15 minutes to the flight, but it keeps us in clear air." "Are you sure?" Chloe challenged. "That's a tight margin. If that cell intensifies, we'll be trapped." "I've studied atmospheric science," Ava countered calmly. "Look at the temperature lapse rate and the upper-level wind shear. The storm is losing its primary energy source. It will begin to dissipate from the northwest. This is our safest route." For the first time, a flicker of relief crossed Chloe's face. This student wasn't just book-smart. She possessed analytical skills and a calm confidence that was infectious. Together, the two young women, one with practical experience, the other with deep academic knowledge, worked as a seamless team. Ava handled communications with air traffic control, managed the aircraft systems, and ran through the checklists, freeing Chloe to focus entirely on the precise, demanding task of flying the plane. As they began their descent into San Diego, the collaboration between the seasoned first officer and the brilliant student had turned a potential catastrophe into a masterfully managed emergency. "SoCal approach Flight 415, Chloe transmitted, her voice now steady and confident. "We are on the ILS for runway 27. Be advised we are a two-person crew. Captain is incapacitated, being assisted by a qualified passenger. Flight 415, SoCal Roger. Emergency vehicles are standing by. Winds are 280 at 10 knots. You are cleared to land. Ava called out altitudes and airspeeds, her voice a calm metronome that helped Chloe execute a perfect landing. As the wheels of the Boeing 737 kissed the runway, a spontaneous roar of applause and cheers erupted from the cabin. By applying her education under unimaginable pressure, Ava had helped save 182 lives, shattering the condescending assumptions of those who had judged her by her age. In the terminal, as they waited for their bags, Harrison Vance approached Ava, his arrogance replaced by profound humility. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I saw a kid with a textbook and made a snap judgment. I had no idea that what you were studying could literally be the difference between life and death. You've taught me a valuable lesson." Dr. Reed was next. "Ava, you were extraordinary. You've shown me that the next generation isn't just prepared. You're more capable than we can imagine. I'll never again make the mistake of thinking academic knowledge is separate from real-world application." The story of Flight 415 became an aviation legend, a powerful case study on the value of modern simulator-based training. Emma received job offers from every major airline, but more importantly, she had proven that in a crisis, what matters most is not age or title, but knowledge, courage, and the willingness to step up when you are needed most. She had learned that sometimes the most unassuming person in the room is the one holding the key to survival.